Hi everyone, so today I thought we could paint a very super wide landscape piece, still in quite an abstract format. I wanted in this demonstration to show you how you can use a unique format for your paintings, and that when you do this, painting in a very wide format but also very slim, the brushes that you'll need and also the things you need to bear in mind for the composition to make sure you're keeping interest across the whole piece. So at the end we'll go through the things that I thought worked and what didn't work, but hopefully this should give you some tips on how to do your own very wide landscape painting. So I had a few colours left over on my palette from my previous painting, so we're going to be using them again today with the Payne's Grey, Quinacridone Lilac and also the Sap Green. So I'm starting off with a very rich mixture of the Payne's Grey with a touch of the lilac to give it a really deep purple. And I'm using a large flat brush, 3/4 inch, to run a line across the centre. It doesn't need to be even, it can be broken in sections. It's to make sure that we can get a nice bit of flow when we add the water into the sky area to give those a sort of a misty tree effect. So I've switched to my very large flat brush, which is 1.5 inches. Now this is great because it will cover the whole of the piece. Even though it's very wide, you can do one even smooth brush stroke with clean water straight across from left to right. And this is giving us our bleed underneath and starting to give us that misty tree effect. Now I'm just taking my smaller flat brush and I'm adding a little bit more dark mixture into that line. This is so that I can get a little bit more flow because we want those bleeds to be really quite big. They need to really stand out on the piece because they're going to be the focal point. So adding some more dark mixture across, and then we'll start to get a bit more bleed again. So back to the large flat brush, and again just running clean water across that section. Keeping it nice and smooth movements, one straight movement from left to right and right to left. And then we'll start adding some colour to the sky. So using the lilac, quite a medium sort of mixture, not too watery, not too thick, somewhere in between. And we'll start adding some colour. Then I'm taking some more of the dark mixture and I'm going to again thicken up that line, dabbing in some more paint, and we should be getting a few more bleeds now, just encouraging it up with the tip of the flat brush. So we're almost pushing the paint into the wetness of the sky. So I think that's finished now for the sky area and the misty trees. So I'm going to use keeping with my large 1.5-inch flat brush, I'm going to be mixing the sap green with a little bit of the Payne's grey to dampen it down. So the idea here is to use the large brush to create some dry brush sections. We're going to use the tip of the brush to add in almost some lines, and the idea is to work with whatever comes out. So that's the beauty of abstract, that you never quite know how it's going to look. But once we do have the foreground, we can then work with that and accentuate a few sections, create almost some grasses, some flowers. But for the main body of adding the foreground colour, it is always great to use a really large flat brush, because with this format and it being so wide, you can cover a lot of the paper without lots of mini little brush strokes, which can look a little bit fussy. So I've added quite a bit more of the rich sap green with less of the Payne's grey on the right hand side. I wanted that section to look a bit richer. Now I've got some salt, some table salt, and I'm just sprinkling in a little bit on the right hand side and then on the far left hand side as well. This should give us a few nice blooms, which will give us some texture and the appearance of something going on without having to use the brush strokes. And you can see here it gives us a nice blooming effect as it dries. So I've brushed off the salt and it has given us some nice blooms on the left and right, which is great for the composition, because now there's something on either sides of the painting which draws the eye. So here I'm using a small round brush and I'm just dabbing in a few sections of dark paint. I quite like this bit in the middle. I think it could be a bit of a focal point. So I decided to accentuate it and add in some dark paint underneath, just using the tip of my brush. And then, because it's rough paper, you can also use your finger to swipe at it, so it gives a bit more of a dry brush it gives a bit of a dry brush effect as you run your finger along the paper. And I'm also doing that with the brush as well. So it doesn't look like a hard line, it sort of blends in with the rest of the paint around it. So now I'm taking my rigger brush, which is great for doing stalks, reeds, grasses. It's got a really nice springy feel to it. And I'm just flicking the brush to create the suggestion of some grasses in the foreground. And then darkening up underneath as well. Now I will carry on with the rigger brush for a little bit, and I'll also be adding some flowers with a fine detail brush, but I'll pop some music on while this section goes on. Now here's where I noticed that I had some salt that had gone into the sky area. I hadn't noticed it before, but it's given some quite obvious blooms. So I decided to paint in some birds in that section, just to cover up those little white patches. I wasn't planning on doing birds, but I suppose we have to work with what we have with the painting. So I did do a little flock of birds in the distance, and then once I'd finished painting in those birds, just using a really dark mixture and a fine detail brush, I then tried to match up the paint as best I could to hide those little white sections and flecks that were left. And there we go. So I really like that. I considering it was just from the paints that I had left on my palette, I was quite pleased how it turned out. I think the wide landscape format works if you're using quite bold colours, if you're creating interest on both sides as well as in the centre. So we've got the main focus in the middle of the painting, but also on the left and the right, because we've used the salt, we've given a little bit more texture, so it still leads your eye through the painting. And then with the bolder colour here on the right in the sky, it almost gives the impression of the lighting effect being a bit lighter over here and then slightly darker, which is why I've also darkened up this corner as well and put a few more little flowers, etc. there. So the birds were an accident, as we know. Be careful with salt. That was my motto for today. So I learned a little bit as well from this tutorial. Be careful with the salt. Don't just slap it on. But you can always, you can make it look a bit better. So I hope you enjoyed that. I really enjoyed painting it. I love the extra wide landscape formats. I think they look quite striking, especially when you do your own purpose-made mount and get them in a really nice wide frame. They're a bit unusual. So thank you for watching today. It's been a pleasure to have you, and I hope you join me in future for some more slightly abstract landscape paintings. And you can also view some other abstract tutorials over on my channel. Bye for now. Thank you for watching.